left you on the debris at the Sunday morning market. You were sorting through the odds and ends. You was looking for a bargain. I heard your footsteps at the front door, in that old familiar love song, 'cause you knew you'd find me waiting there at the top of the stairs. I went there and back just to see how far it was, and you tried to tell me.
Estonia speaks the truth. Estonia speaks the truth. I know. Gerhartz in DC. You're in New York.
Are you ready? Oh, is he? Oh, wonderful. Yeah. TBD. Good morning. Ready? Okay. Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the Leonard Mary Conference. Honored to be joined with an esteemed panel. We have with us Hanno Pevkur, the Minister of Defense of Estonia, Baiba Braže, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Latvia, good morning. General Ingo Gerhartz, who is the commander of NATO Allied Joint Force Command in Brunssum, Robert Wilkie, the chairman of the Center of American Security and the former U.S. Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and Carlo Masala, chair for international politics at Bundeswehr University in Munich. And we're discussing European defense, something that I have over the years heard discussed at this forum a number of times. Let me set the stage for you. I come to you from Washington, D.C., where the only constant seems to be chaos. The officials I speak to tell me they often don't know where or when or how a decision was made, even more so than the first Trump administration. The diplomats I speak to say they're talking to the interlocutors who are supposed to know what's going on, and yet, usually in the mornings, they get blindsided. They call those interlocutors, and they can't explain how the decision was made, or what it means, or even if it's real. They'd say, just watch Truth Social. So you could say that President Trump is making us all exercise a brand new muscle, how to deal with anxiety, how to plan for the uncertain. Now, at conferences like this, I have been hearing for more than a decade that Europe is going to work on its own defense. And yet, as I usually hear from Estonian politicians, they're slow at this job. And Latvian politicians, of course. So I would like to hear from you all to open your snapshot of where you think things are and where they need to go. You have some prepared remarks, so I will go to our host first.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone, and those who are the first time in Lennart Meri, welcome. It's not about the prepared marks. It's about that's what we need to do, and when we think about that Europe is spending at the moment close to half a trillion already to defense, then this is significantly more what we did a couple of years ago. So this is a good news. And you cannot have the capabilities without the money. So you need to invest money to have more capabilities. On the other hand, US is preparing for the budget of 1.5 trillion. Russian defense budget is roughly 150 billion. So first, I believe that Europe must have more self-confidence that we are ready to defend ourselves if needed. Secondly, of course, we all understand that Europe will do more, needs to do more, but is already doing and will need to do more. And thirdly, that when we want to do more, then we need to cooperate also with industry, because otherwise we see that the prices are going up. So I have discussions with my national armament director constantly, and then what we see is that when we bought something 2 years ago, and when we now want to increase these quantities, what we bought, the same thing, and then the prices have gone up like 50–60% for some items. So this is the reality. So we are investing more money, our taxpayers' money, but we are getting the same quantities or even less. So it has to be two-way traffic where the taxpayers will take more responsibility and heavier burden, but on the other hand also that there is a responsibility from the industry side that, of course, we see some inflation, we see some increase of the prices, we see higher demand of the chips, explosives, etc. But it is very difficult to build our sovereign defense when we don't cooperate with industry. So many things to do, but in general, I would say that when we take the 100-meter run, then we've started. So we've reached like first 20 meters, but still 80 meters needs to be run, and then we cannot, be in the position on the 80 meters that we will not finish. So this is also important to keep in mind that doesn't matter if the war in Ukraine will be over or when, and it will be over one day. Even after that, we need to continue helping Ukraine, but we also need to increase our own capabilities. That we cannot say that, okay, the war in Ukraine is over, now we can have 1% again. What happened after the collapse of the Soviet Union? Because in early 80s, NATO countries invested 4% by average, and then after the collapse of the Soviet Union, all dropped to 1%. Mm. And this is why the gap in capabilities is so big at the moment. So we can bring also good examples. For instance, Finland, okay, they were not part of the alliance that time, but they continued to invest. And their capabilities are totally different, like domestic capabilities, Article 3 capabilities. So, and just a final remark. We calculated that when we take the capability targets we've agreed a year ago, on 2nd of June last year, and when we reach these capabilities and when we do all these investments we've decided to do now in 4 years, then we cannot drop below 5%. Or the consequence is that you have to pack some of the capabilities or some of the equipment to the warehouse, not to touch them, etc. So when we go to 5% or above, what Estonia did already this year, then we need to stay there for a very long time. And this is why we put also to the new security strategy, what is at the moment in Parliament, we put that we will invest 5% for the years to come.
Just a brief follow-up. What is the reason, the main reason for the spike in prices by 50 to 60%? Mm-hmm.
There is not one main reason. Supply lines, components, workforce, investments into the new production capabilities and capacities. So many reasons behind that. But the reality is that we see increased prices. So this is the reality.
All right, we'll
Let me answer that from the American perspective. We also suffered from the delusions that history stopped once the Berlin Wall fell. We have now consolidated our defense industries into 5, maybe 5.5 major companies. In the last 10 years, we have lost 11,000 small and medium-sized defense companies in the United States, the engines of innovation. And the one example I will give, as Undersecretary of Defense for Readiness under General Mattis, I signed off on a $7 billion aircraft carrier, the battle line of Okinawa of 1945, if you really want to look at it that way. Today, that aircraft carrier is still in dry dock in Newport News, Virginia, and the price tag has now reached $18 billion. Wow. Now, no president in his right mind is going to put an $18 billion aircraft carrier within range of $1 million Chinese anti-ship missile. And for that money, I could have put 5, 6, 7 attack submarines in the Pacific, the things that the Chinese still don't know how to handle. So what the minister was saying is equally applicable to the United States when it comes to costs and the lack of a supply chain. The Chinese have 110 shipyards, we have 10. And if we don't cooperate with our friends in Finland and Sweden and North and South Korea and Japan, we will never catch up. We have the smallest Navy since 1938. So
No.
apologize for...
No, absolutely. And I'm sure we will come back to that. Minister Braže, how do you see what's the report card you would give European defense?
I think it doesn't make sense really to beat ourselves on the head or pour ashes on our heads. But the lines of efforts that we have had since 2014, when the first Russian invasion in Ukraine took place, are still the same, because the threat is the same. And it has morphed, it has advanced, but Russia is a threat and will be a threat in the foreseeable future. So those lines of efforts are strengthening our own national defense. So we have enshrined in law 5% of GDP for defense. Second, making sure NATO is strong. So the center of gravity, which is unity, we all have to do maximum, all of us. And here, it's not only statements with which we wake up in our phones, it's also the other way. So watching what we do and making sure we perform, but also what we say. Okay? And always checking, how does it help our security or defense? How does it help our economic interests? And how does it help our people? So if we can check those points positively, then we speak. And that's policy. The third line of effort is helping Ukraine. And here again, sustaining was the word first, but now Ukraine largely sustains its operations. We have to ensure that they get what is needed in terms of air defenses, where there is a very concrete need that they have. And that is not replaceable by national capacity of Ukraine, but also a few other things in practical terms. And I see my friend Artis Pabriks, who was defense minister at the time. We supplied Ukraine with our Stingers before the war started because we trusted Intel, also referring to the Intel discussion we had last night. And those Stingers actually helped to defend Kiev in Hostomel. And Kiev didn't fall when the war started. So trusting gives if you have good intel and if you trust and making political decisions and helping that line of effort that's yours. And fourth line of effort, and it's not a chronological or priority list, but it's all happening at the same time, is weakening Russia. And as less money, as less technology, as less partnerships, enablements Russia has, as better it is for Ukraine, as better it is for us. And again, their political cohesion matters not only within the alliance, within the EU, but also with like-minded states around the globe. And here diplomacy plays a key role, also with those countries helping evading sanctions, those countries who sort of pretend not to know what's happening on the battlefield, what Russians are doing, and so on and so forth. So those 4 lines of effort will make sure that Russian warfare model that we are seeing in Ukraine will not succeed. Mm-hmm. So Russia has largely been stopped. Ukraine has frozen the front. The kill zone is there. Ukrainians have developed long-range capacities and also terminal velocity targeting. They are able to take out what's needed. And if we speak about the Russian model of warfare, just think people say that they are moving at snail's pace. It's an insult to snails. Snails, if we put a snail in Avdiivka, it would, in 22 February, by now it would be somewhere near Czechia. So Russians are still in the same place.
While we have the opportunity, some of us in the press got to go on a tour and visit NATO troops doing the exercise right now in Estonia. And we were warned as we got to the border to turn off our phones because we might do one of 2 things. Our phones might automatically switch to Russian service and we get a really high bill, and or the Russians might be able to hack us. So, of course, we all turned off our phones. But the other thing that we were told is that Russian spoofing of GPS, et cetera, it's constant. That has caused Ukrainian drones aimed for Russian targets to go off target, hit Finland, hit Estonia, and of course hit Latvia. So, Minister Braže, can you just give us, the audience, a brief sit-rep, since everyone's heard a little bit about controversy in Latvia over drones, over what has happened?
Well, the first Shahed, the Russian Shahed, fell in Latvia in September 24. And that was a Shahed that Russia had sent to Ukraine. Ukrainians had spoofed it, and it was flying via Belarus and so on and so forth, and then fell into Latvia. Didn't do damage, but still, it was a big shock. So from there on, of course, the concept changed. The radars, the autonomous systems, the interceptors, and so on and so forth were being added. Close work with Ukrainians was happening. This last case was Ukrainian drones that were misdirected by Russians, so electronic warfare by Russians. And again, there were some fails on our side, but quite clearly we are talking both to Ukrainians and also have told Russians to stop their propagandas that we are giving our airspace to Ukrainian drones, because that's not true. They were flying through the Russian airspace, and it was Russia misdirecting them. So it's Russia's fault. I mean, there is no war, there is no drones, there is nothing. So
apparently,
let's be clear what it is.
Because of AI, these drones tried to target some of your critical infrastructure?
I cannot confirm that. No.
Okay. But you are now part of a caretaker government because of the fallout.
There's always a government in Latvia.
And so that is something that is, as you can see, having an effect on throughout the Baltic region, something everyone's having to deal with.
The Baltics are very stable, secure, and we love each other.
Wonderful. You heard it here. General Gerhartz, your thoughts on how we're doing on European defense, since you're at the pointy end.
Yeah, thanks, Kim, and as well, hello to everybody from my side. So yes, I would like to give you a snapshot from a military perspective. Where are we right now, and especially what is the way we have to proceed on? So my military perspective belongs especially to my area of responsibility, and that stretches from the Gulf of Finland down to Hungary, Slovakia, and from the eastern border to the Atlantic. In numbers, in case of an Article 5 scenario, in my area of responsibility, we have almost up to 1 million soldiers. And another number to it is more than 50% of the European population are living in our area of responsibility. And if I see it from a pure military perspective, we came up with the capability targets some years ago, the defense spending, which has to be linked to it, that we have the financial resources to perceive the equipment. And this is really the future of NATO. That's what we call sometimes the fight tomorrow. And if I go a bit more backwards to the European depths, they are happy about it. It's kind of, yes, we go forward, and in some years we are at the point. Sometimes in media I read from politicians and as well from some of the generals, yes, in 2020, 2029, we are ready to defend. I do not like those timelines at all. And here, especially forward, people are not caring about 2029 or 2030, they care about today. And that's really important that we have this common understanding from the so-called frontline nations to the European depths. And I see myself as kind of a moderator to take that together, that we have this common understanding. We have to be ready today. That doesn't mean that we have to evolve and get even better and have more capabilities tomorrow, but we have to be ready today. I think we can take the Baltics, like Estonia and Latvia, as a center of gravity, which shows us how to do it. Deploying the forces forward, evolving to modern warfare technology. I've visited the exercise Springstorm. I've seen a lot of innovative new technologies with different nations. So especially here in Estonia, you have United Kingdom being the framework nation for the frontline, for the forward land forces. And we do with every forward land forces in all the countries, it makes 9 in total. Every year we do what we call an expansion exercise. So we ramp up the forward land forces in very, very soon time. So high readiness. And that is something we can see from Estonia how it works. High readiness, forward deployed forces. But it's not only just the forces, it's the resilience of this in the society as well. And that is something which we really can derive from the more forward nations like Estonia, Latvia, to all the other nations. So I see NATO already, we're already well suited today, but we still have to improve and get better and have more capabilities for the fight tomorrow. And now we have to picture this and put it into the frame of, and that was mentioned yesterday a couple of times, in this NATO 3.0, a less commitment in NATO. So how does that fight tonight and the path to fight tomorrow, how does that work now with a more or less US commitment? So first of all, we have to stay in a close dialogue. I'm going to the US next week. I fully understand that they have to shift their effort more to the Indo-Pacific, but it has to be interlinked with the European build-up. Let's take one example. We really need deep strike capabilities in order to deter. Right now, most of the deep strike capabilities come from the US. So asking for an interim fielding of those capabilities, and in parallel, the Europeans have to go up. So that should be a rational, more, I would say, from a military perspective, more cooled down discussion. Yesterday, I heard so many questions to our American friend. It was very hyped up, emotional type. And we always talk about Trump, what he's mentioning. From a European NATO commander perspective, I would say we should stop crying and get moving. Thanks.
So basically, you are talking about the 4,000 to 5,000 US troops that are being withdrawn from the rotational force. And apparently it overlaps. The ones in Poland are the same ones that are being withdrawn from Germany, but that's a deep strike capability.
That's not a deep strike capability.
No.
Okay.
We're talking about land forces, and I believe that, we should not speculate. I really suggest not to speculate. And again, if US is changing the force posture, then this is their right. The Europeans, we have to concentrate on that, what we are doing. And when we think, again, when I come back to the financing and funding of the defense, just take that when we all would invest 4%, not 5, but 4%, then this would give us roughly 1 trillion in Europe only to defense. So this is like 2 times more than what we are investing today. And this is totally new capability. And I fully agree with the general that the deep strikes, and we need to deter Russia not only by that we have the land forces.
So I understand you say you want bridging capability, but the reporting on some of the unit that is being withdrawn is that it was partly responsible for having capability of targeting Moscow.
No.
That's the reporting in the United States.
Well, I don't know what the reporting is. Okay. So we are in contact with our friends in US and
nothing has been moved.
And again,
okay.
I really suggest not to speculate. That we're working on the military level with that. Political military communication is established. So I've been in contact with our friends. Yesterday also I spoke with the SACEUR. So we had a very good discussion with the Undersecretary Hanno and then our US ambassador to Estonia. So we are in contact and we are working on that.
So what capability are they losing? Are they withdrawing?
Well, again, let the military work on that. So we know that the US is changing the force posture globally. So this is under the process at the moment. So as long as it's not confirmed what will be changed, then there is no point to speculate. I would like to have the crystal ball here on the table, and say, okay, next year we will have that. We don't have it. So, and I strongly believe that we should more focus on that, what we are doing. It's very nice to speculate at what US is doing or not doing.
But we're not speculating. There was an announcement by the Pentagon.
There is a full support, I think, by all of us to what Secretary General wants to get at Ankara, which is both very clear commitment on defense spending, because we committed politically at the Hague summit last year. So by Ankara, allies have to show progress, and it's not only the Baltics and Poles, and Germans, but also others. Second, defense industry. Yeah, he's gathering the big industry companies like SecGens do, like Jens Stoltenberg did. So Mark Rutte has continued, because that sort of joint work by the European industry is crucial to address this production sort of gap that we have had for years. So that is where SecGen really expects announcements, not only by percentage, but actually actual orders, actual contracts, and also delivery lines by the companies. Plus, in capability targets, and General knows that like SACEUR does, to also add the tech, the autonomous systems, etc., to the capability targets that we all have. That is a big line of effort. So okay. That is all that is happening for the summit, beginning of July in Ankara, and there is a full support to succeed on that. So again, on military issues, military will address those. They have lines of communications, they have their procedures and everything. Nothing has been withdrawn currently from anywhere. So, there's nothing.
Let me highlight just one very shortly. Regarding
Secretary
the readiness.
Hegseth made an announcement, and then it was discussed on Capitol Hill yesterday in open testimony.
We all know that. So okay. we can read also the Truth Social, so it is not a problem. So,
you should have been in the cabinet for 3 years.
For sure. So I've been in cabinet for 12 years, so in Estonia at least. Yeah. So we know how the politics goes. So this is not a question. The question is that, where the focus is. And the reality is that the focus in Europe is not overall in Europe, what it should be. The reality is that the world and the military understanding logistics has changed. So there is the difference between attacking Tallinn with a ballistic missile or Berlin or Madrid is 10 minutes. So the reality is that you can have a container ship on the Mediterranean full of Shahed drones, and the early warning is not 2 days, it's 2 minutes. Or beautiful coast of Saint-Tropez. So this is the reality. And when we don't understand that Europe is small, then and also our good friends in Italy, Spain, France, Portugal, we all need to invest at least 3.5, better 5% into defense in order to defend our beautiful continent Europe, then we will be in trouble. It will not fade away. It will not go away that this threat will just be somewhere. We've seen from last 30 years that Russia has started in last 30 years at least 5 big wars or military conflicts. 2 Chechen wars, Georgia, Crimea, full-scale invasion to Kiev and then Ukraine. So every 6 years.
Not to Kiev.
Okay, they launched the attack, so they were not successful.
They're stuck.
So when we really do believe that there will be a change of the pattern, I would like to see that. But unfortunately, in 30 years, we've not seen that.
No, the threat remains the same. I fully agree with Hanno, and it's not going to change for a while. There is no indication of change. There is no indication of giving up any of the objectives the butchering Kremlin has put forward, whether with regard to Ukraine, whether with regard to the European security, and let's be serious about it. So the defense industry also has to put their not only ask for the government contract, but actually capacity to produce as a priority.
So General Gerhartz, considering that the threat from Russia remains the same, were you surprised by the withdrawal announcement, or are you going to the Pentagon to get to the bottom of it? I mean, how do you plan with that kind of uncertainty?
Adding to what the ministers just mentioned, let me try to explain it. We are now very focused on what is the deployment working? Are there cancellation of a rotational model, whatever? We shouldn't speculate. From my view, I have a defense plan nested and interlinked with the nations, and I need certain capabilities today and tomorrow. And the area of capabilities, especially in the field of intelligence, reconnaissance and surveillance, what we call ISR, which is really important to see what is happening, to get indications and warnings, what Russia might perceive towards to. Not a single asset got withdrawn from the US. And now we have to start this process in what is the prioritization of Europeans getting capabilities we still now have from the US in NATO Europe.
So you said, just to make sure I understood correctly, you said not a single asset has been withdrawn by the US.
Exactly.
In the second Trump administration.
Right. In this topic, in this area. And now we have to start this process. How can Europeans come up with the same capabilities that the US can withdraw those capabilities and shift them somewhere else? And I see this process should be an orchestrated, organized process, and from my perspective, it is. So we are very in close talk. That's why I'm going there, not to hear what is now the new rotational model, to really talk about, and the Europeans. I see, once again, and that's what I mean with stop crying. Look at the economical power in Europe. Look at the technological power, the brain power we have in Europe. Right. I mean, if we cannot stand up for that, come on. I see still a need for more collaboration, that we go together to create this industrial base. I think that's something the Europeans can improve, and I leave a lot to the politicians. I always take the example of the next generation fighter aircraft. We have 2 tracks in Europe right now, and right now it doesn't look like it is a success story, I would say. So hey, let's collaborate and go together.
Thank you. Secretary Wilkie, though you've told me to call you Robert.
Yes, yes. I was telling the folks that when I became an honorable, my grandfather, who commanded a minesweeper at D-Day, put a note in my pocket and said, when you get back to Washington, read it. And I opened it up and it said, that title and 60 cents will get you a ride on a New Orleans bus. So Robert is fine. I want to pick up on something that the general said, and I want to get the elephant in the room in front of us, and you can have at me later. You can see I'm wearing a pin with the flag of Ukraine and the United States. I was born into NATO. I was born in the last week of the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 116th Field Hospital outside of Frankfurt. There was one doctor and one nurse left behind to take care of me and my mother, while my father commanded an Honest John missile battery on the East German border. He had a life expectancy of 90 seconds, if anything happened. The United States must be part of Europe. Culturally we are, historically we are. I still blame the French for discovering my hometown, New Orleans, the most European of American cities, but they founded it on a malarial swamp 5 feet below sea level. So that's my bona fides. I want to pick on something that the general said, and I will use our Canadian friends as the whipping horse. I was in Calgary and Toronto giving speeches about Western civilization. And of course, I got the Trump barrage leveled at me. I said, that's fine. When I was born, Canada had the 4th largest army in NATO. President Eisenhower, to his dying day, said the finest troops he commanded were Canadian. The Canadian Army is the size of the Alabama National Guard, our 30th largest state. And I can go down the list. I think the most important thing that has happened with President Trump's rhetoric, which I don't agree with. I come from a part of the country where we are considered to have a cultivated set of manners, according to de Tocqueville. We don't understand New York talk. But what he has done is the same thing that President Eisenhower said in his farewell address, when he said that if the United States is still providing more than half of the forces and the money for NATO in 10 years, we will have failed. I worked for Bob Gates when he made that statement here in Europe about Europe doing more. You are a superpower. Germany is a technological giant. Those are the things that need to come to the fore to balance off, and now I'll get to the threat. There is a continuum. It's a continuum that is more complicated and in some ways more threatening than the sclerotic Soviet Union ever was. It begins in Beijing. The arc goes through Tehran into Moscow. I make the argument that confronting the Russians in Ukraine and removing the mullahs from the world stage weakens the one object that certain people in the Pentagon, I will not name names, but he's the Undersecretary for Policy, say is the be-all and end-all, and that's China. Well, friends, if you want to weaken China, then you destroy its avenues for mischief. Because before the Ukrainians stood their ground, I could have perceived, once Xi decided to go for Taiwan, 2 phone calls being made. One to Moscow, one to Tehran, disperse American power, cause problems in Eastern Europe, cause problems in the Middle East, and we have a shot across the straits. And to me, the solution is very much, and I see our British friends here, British imperial strategy. We strike the periphery to get to the core. That's what the Royal Navy gave the British Empire for 400 years, until they gladly handed off their mantle to the young American Colossus at the end of World War I. So if we are going to do that, we need to ensure, one, that we're anchored in Europe, but that Europe keeps those commitments. We don't need any more Canadas. We don't need any more Spain lecturing us. And in the case of Canada, it goes back to Trudeau 1, back when he was...
Leave Canada alone. We love them.
Yeah.
There's thousands of them in Latvia.
Well, I like Canada. I like
courses.
Canada too, but since they're not here, I can be they can be the object. And it's not just Europe who needs to concentrate and reform. I mentioned we have the smallest Navy since 1938. We have the oldest Air Force since Harry Truman created the service in 1947. We have 2,500 aircraft on our battle rolls for the United States Air Force, the last of which came online in the first month of the Kennedy administration. We have to adjust our budget process. The budget process, the acquisition process of the Department of Defense is the last legacy of Robert Strange McNamara. It is based on the assembly line of Ford Motor Company in 1955. We cannot right now adjust to the rapid changes in technology and threats that we need to adjust to in order to meet the Chinese, of course, and the Russians and the Iranians. So it's not just Europe. And again, we have the power if we concentrate. The United States has intervened in 3 European civil wars in the lifetime of my grandmother, who just passed away at the age of 105. We want to I think we should stay here so we don't have to intervene in another at the last minute. So a lot of things need to be done. I think Europe is on the right track, at least rhetorically. And last point, Kiev, the Ukrainians have reminded us 2 things on the battlefront. One, the peer-on-peer lessons of the 20th century are still with us. But a smaller nation without a navy can sink a surface navy. A smaller nation without a strategic air force can destroy 30 to 40% of a larger nation's strategic air force. And that is what we have to look to. How do we combine those 2 trends in warfare to prevent a future that sees China and its appendages in the ascendancy? So I will stop there.
Thank you. Professor Masala, or as you have told me to call you, Carlo, you have listened to the assembled personages. Your thoughts?
Well, thank you. Since I'm the only non-official here, I can speculate about things.
Excellent.
Now, I think I pick up what Robert said. Rhetorically, we're on the right track. I would say we are on the right track, but in everything we do, we are far too slow. I mean, imagine our political leaders and even the military leaders, they basically are planning and executing under this date of 2029. We are in the midst of 2026. And if you look where we are, we didn't advance that much, to exaggerate a bit. We are still having some, which I would say, pretty stupid conceptual debates, which shows to me that in a lot of European countries, there is no clear idea on basically how the Russians would attack, what kind of warfare they would wage against NATO or European countries. I mean, we have this stupid debate about drones versus infantry, let's put it this way. Yeah? So some people are focusing solely on drones, while others making the point, that you need to include drones in actually your armed forces. And this reveals a bit that we have no clear idea on the way, basically, Russia would attack and what we would do in order to defend ourselves. Because my point would always be the essence of warfighting is defending territory, holding territory, and conquering territory. So you need, of course, the boots on the ground. We still have a conceptual debate or a theological debate on the European level, whether to buy European or even to allow, buying from third countries. And we didn't make up a decision in most of the European countries. And I would always make the distinction. The closer you are geographically speaking to Moscow, the better the situation is. The further away you go from Moscow, geographically speaking, the worse the situation is. We still haven't made our mind up about, going back to the conscript system. We all know that mass matters, but for political reasons, a lot of countries are shying away to basically going back to the conscript system. So these are some of the, let's say, theological debates we're still having in Europe, and where I would say, if 2029 is really the horizon where we have to be ready, we are far too slow. We still have no, it already had been mentioned, we still have no industrial base for speeding up production of tanks, fighter planes, and frigates. Second point is, and here I think I have a different opinion than most of the other panelists, the political signaling is a disaster. A president basically who through social, tells basically every day that first of all, there is the US and NATO. I mean, yesterday I spent quite a lot of time at the Frankfurt airport and I checked the NATO treaty, so the US is still part of NATO. But he's talking about NATO as if this is something distinct from the US. Yeah, he calls NATO, I don't know how many times he called NATO a paper tiger and the Europeans useless. So this is a disaster in signaling about, commitment and resolve to defend Europe. So more than, whatever we do on a military level, whatever Ingo and the others are doing, deterrence is based also on, as we all know, on psychology. So if the other one has to believe that he will face consequences if he does something. If you have a president who basically every day, questions NATO's ability to do something, politically speaking, this is a disaster. And even making, I can understand from your perspective to say, we shouldn't not speculate about what the US is doing in terms of troop withdrawal or not sending deep strike capabilities to Europe. But the point is, it's the US who makes these announcements. And this is also a disastrous political signaling. Even at the end of the day, the US won't pull out this 5,000, this rotating brigade. It will send deep strike capabilities, but the damage has been done just by talking about this. And this is what basically we have to understand. Yeah. If I'm too long, I stop here. I have a couple of other points, but I can bring them into the debate and discussion.
Yes, just to add to that, so just
interject.
a couple of things regarding this 27, 29, and the perspective, very briefly. First, defend today or fight today approach what we have in Estonia, that we have the understanding that we don't have time. But why we don't have time, and when I take globally, and also here in Europe. So we are unfortunate that we are approaching very quickly the perfect storm situation. We have a problem in the UK with the government. We have elections, presidential elections coming in France. We have a clear signal that there will be a change of the global force posture from the US armed forces. I'm not talking about the smaller political questions mentioned in Latvia. But again...
Deal with Estonia.
Yes, as always. We are good friends. But in general, when we take the big powers, then Germany is maybe the only one at the moment in Europe, when you talk about the big countries, European from the perspective, saying clearly that they will go with the defense spending to 160, 170 billions and 3.5%, and have said very clearly what they do. But France, UK, US, so the big powers and nuclear powers are in somehow turmoil. And now, when I would sit in Kremlin and think that, okay, what is the best time to poke NATO and to test NATO? Then unfortunately, this is not 29.
It's now.
This is 27 or 26. So this is why we don't have time, and this is why we have to understand that if needed, we go today.
Yeah, I'll put that in perspective for money. As Undersecretary of Defense, I spent more on the health care for the dependents of soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, the children and spouses, than Britain and France spend on defense combined. And as the minister just said, and of course we need Britain and France, but with the turmoil they're experiencing, that is not a good signal to send to the Russians either. And those numbers are stark. More on health care for children than the fourth and fifth largest economies on the planet spend on defense.
So I already see some questions from the audience, but we do have one other topic that we wanted to touch on. Well, kind of two. Do you buy from China as part of this ramp up of defense? And also the significance of the war in Iran right now. I want to start, General Gerhartz, with the war in Iran. Any lessons that you're learning from watching how that's playing out that you would apply here?
Yeah, Kim, let me combine this question one versus your comment in that we are still seeking in how we have to develop military capabilities. What do we really need? You mentioned infantry versus counter US or small drones. So first of all, we have already a good concept on what do we need. It's reflected in the capability targets. There are initiatives like the Eastern Flank Deterrence Initiative from the Land Command of NATO, from US Youth RAF, one of the successors from Ben Hodges. So we know where we have to go. For sure, we always have to take lessons out of Ukraine, and that's what we're doing now with the war in Iran. We see the sheer numbers, and we really have to differentiate between are we able to defend against a wave of 4-digit number drones, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, or are we able to defend every little airport in Europe against a whatever drone is flying there? So sometimes we always mix those type of discussions. I'm for the military part in part of defending. So that's something now we really have to look into. We see this, that's the main outcome of the conflict in Iran. This need, and that's not new for us. We know that already, and it's part of the capability targets as well. This need for magazine depths, that we need much more in numbers.
Mega symptoms? Sorry. Magazine
depths. So that we know how much missiles we need, how much countering systems, and so on. We have the numbers. I mean, sure, I cannot elaborate on those numbers, quite obvious, but that's not new for us. By this point, is that fast enough? Who knows? Could be faster? Yes. I think that's something we still have to work on. How can, especially on the European side of the house in NATO, how can we, and again, it's about industries, it's about innovative industries, how can they more collaborate? How is it possible to tie the nations together in order to increase that rate? If it comes, for example, magazine depth is a clear question of how many missiles you can put against whatever targets. And we have to, as well, and that's another outcome, we see it in Ukraine, but we see it as well in Iran, it's what we call sometimes the economy of war. You cannot shoot with a high-cost Patriot missile defense system against a low-cost drone. So that's something we have to adapt. But we have the plans for it. Is industry ready yet? No, but we have to go there.
But industry always tells me that until they get the orders from governments, they're not going to build the production lines.
It's chicken and egg question. So I was this week in Germany also, and I spoke with the Rheinmetall CEO, and they are investing heavily. And I said like 2-3 years ago already that
exactly.
if the industry doesn't understand that there will be a lot of money on the market, absolutely, then you are late. And if there is someone who understands that there will be a new money on the market and governments will spend more, lately, or the latest information came in The Hague that we agreed on the 5%. Then when you calculate that, again, these are hundreds of billions of new money onto the market. So it will be there. So when you say that we need the contract in order to offer the production capability, then you are late already, because we need to have the products, and we don't have the time to wait until 2030 or 2035. So this is why it was actually 2 years ago when it had to be made the decision to invest into
So
production.
you are seeing industry react to this predicted demand signal?
Some have reacted very rapidly. So when we take also, for instance, some German companies like Helsing or many others, then they sniffed that you need to invest, and that they've done that. Also, Rheinmetall is investing heavily at the moment. Many others are investing heavily. But those who started 2 years ago have the clear advantage today.
But that's the point. I mean, they are reacting, but if you sign a contract today, you get the product in 3 years. So if you buy a new tank, you get the product in 3 years. And this, of course, I mean, because we don't have the capacity to scale up. And that's one of the problems, I would say. That's why I say we are far too slow. Yeah.
So will everyone be in the situation where you're like Ukraine, you scale up under fire because you never thought the fire would come, really?
Well,
I think that
sometimes,
we will scale up under fire.
We were
That's what
together
they're doing.
with Constance just a few days in one debate, and I said that sometimes you need when you're obese, you need to have a stroke to have an understanding. You need to go running. So,
But actually, I mean, our aim is to prevent the fire.
Yeah.
So therefore, we need the stuff before the fire breaks out.
One item I put in the transition plan for the Department of Defense in the lead up to the new administration was using the example that I was able to use as the VA secretary. I declared a state of emergency for COVID in January of 2020 and worked with the White House to use the Defense Production Act to force the creation of a COVID vaccine, something that if we'd followed the usual process would have taken 10 to 15 years to do. And putting that in the defense transition plan, I focused on what I call the mundane aspects of defense production, things that we need. We're seeing that is needed in Ukraine in particular, artillery shells, small precision-guided munitions, more drones, to use the power of the government to force-feed industry, because go back to what I said about the $18 billion carrier. It's not sexy creating shells for 155 guns. It's sexy trying to come up with a Star Wars-like catapult for a Gerald Ford class aircraft carrier, which probably doesn't work, as we found out. We're back to the steam catapult, which was used at the Battle of Midway. So those are the things that we have in our arsenal that we need to do. And again, going back, Ukraine has shown us that we can't just concentrate on one aspect of warfare. They've shown us the way to the future. Yeah. May I answer your question about Iran real fast? And I also mentioned the symbiotic relationship with China, Iran, and Russia. According to the British MOD, the last major drone strike on Kiev, 80% of the drones were made in Iran. I always look at Iran through the prism of the words of Golda Meir. When somebody tells you over and over again he wants to kill you, believe it. We are succeeding in Iran. There's some people who are cheering against that success. Again, according to London, they have 3 weeks left of funds in their treasury. The blockade is working. I'm sorry that we went through a strategic pause. I think the pressure should have been kept up. Because remember, for us, and for the rest of Western civilization, Iran is China's foothold in the Middle East. The day before the last round of attacks started, 5 Chinese ships were in Iranian ports offloading so-called dual-use technologies, and they weren't going to be used for transistor radios for the mullahs. Dual-use technology for ballistic missiles, which Iran was building as rapidly as they could after the June attacks by Israel and the United States. We've been at war with Iran since I was a little boy. The colonel across the street from us at Fort Bragg was a guest of the Ayatollah for 450 days. The colonel around the corner, Colonel Charles Beckwith, commanded the ill-fated hostage rescue attempt at Desert One. One of my father's assignments in 1983 was to investigate what went wrong at Marine Barracks with 200 40 American sailors and Marines were killed. They've killed thousands of our people. They have no intention of stopping. The current foreign minister says Israel is a one-bomb solution. But eliminating them hurts Russia, and it hurts China.
Here's the problem. You're not eliminating them. Iran has a deep bench.
Oh, certainly.
And they taught the region insurgency.
They're
threatening to
sure.
decimate energy resources across the Gulf.
So Hezbollah is almost gone. Hamas is gone. Certainly the conventional capabilities of the Iranians are gone. What we do with the blockade is, by eliminating their ability to pay their security forces, then you begin to see the separation of the true believers from the fellow travelers. And the fellow travelers are going to go back to take care of their families. And what I'm looking for is the same thing we saw in 1979, when the security forces stopped firing on their own people. That was the end of the Shah. But this is not a short-term thing, and I'm going to agree with the premise that you laid out, but you didn't state. And I go back to Bismarck, when he said that woe be to the statesman whose reasons for entering war are not as clear at the end as they were at the beginning. The American people have not been told, as they should have been told, what the strategic goals are in this fight. We have a high threshold of pain. I'm a child of Vietnam. The American people didn't turn on Vietnam until Richard Nixon came in and said, I'm going to end it. And then he got rid of the draft and the protests stopped. But it took him a long time to say we need to leave, because then we weren't explaining what we were doing either.
Right.
So that's the issue. I do think the military is doing wonders, but they're going to run out of people to run through their leadership.
We'll see. TBD. Minister Braje, you wanted a point.
I'm looking at the theme of the discussion, European defense strategy or Europe's defense strategy, and how these questions and debate relate to that. And I think there is a very direct relationship, because Iran has been helping Russia, not only since the beginning of the war, but before. The relationship has been deep, special, from everything, from politics to nuclear to propaganda. Remember, the Russian propaganda machine is the only one allowed to broadcast into Iran without limits. Not the BBC, not the Western, nothing. And so it's a tight relationship. It's still there. Russia is helping Iran as we speak, and that hasn't changed. So taking down that capacity that Iran has a very direct European interest. Also, what the war showed was that, if anything, the cooperation and the link between US and Europe is even shorter and closer, and the theaters are ever more interlinked. So that relationship needs strengthening, not weakening.
Are you willing to put up with the pain of the energy price fallout, potential recession, the annoyance that the U.S. didn't brief its European allies in order to get Iran, a weaker Iran, for the next 10, 20 years?
I'm not thinking in those categories. Annoyance is not something that I count into my calculations. I mean, there are decisions that we make and that need making, and the fact that we need alternative resources, and the fact that this will lead to the Gulf developing alternative routes for the exports is what will happen. There will be alternatives. There's enough to be had, but it does need different rerouting, and the others are stepping up also. So, and the renewables and everything, I mean, let's not again sort of think what's bad, but what do we do about it? And there are things to be done.
You've gone right through angst to, like, let's just figure out what to do about it.
Absolutely. And then the other point on Europe's defense strategy and the relationship is that with China that you asked, is that indeed Ukraine's production model depended largely on supplies from China, just as Russia's ability to fight the war. I mean, Russian dependency on China, when you look at the trade data, when you look at everything, is total. Okay, so Ukrainians have been able to replace parts of it, but that scalability and autonomy and the mass that they were able to produce very much depended on supplies of China. And together with UK, we are leading drone coalition in NATO, but also for Ukraine with many other countries. And in the drone production, there are elements where companies depend on China. It's true. And it's there, and we haven't yet gotten to that scalability and autonomy that we need, but we will get there. But it's just we need more, and there are so many questions.
Thank you. We have 11 minutes left, and we got to take some questions from the audience. Let's see.
The Latvian group is there.
Ed Lucas, JJ Green, and this gentleman here, and then we'll take 3 more.
Latvian group.
And the Latvian. Sorry. So let's start with Ed Lucas.
He's Latvian too.
Ed Lucas?
Not Ed Luce. It's very clear from what you're saying that we've left it too late with defence, because Russia's not going to wait till we're ready. This is not like a football game where the referee blows the whistle. So that means there's a huge emphasis on deterrence. And that's what you were referring to at the beginning, Kimberly, with the decision not to send the deep strike battalion. That came at the beginning of May. That was an earlier catastrophe, overshadowed by the latest news, the brigade combat team. So my question is to the panel, where do we get the long-range fires that we need quickly, and what compromises can we make? We can buy them from Ukraine, we can buy them from South Korea, we can get them from the Netherlands with the router. There'll be compromises on survivability, velocity, lethality, but that's the question facing us, and we have very little time to do it.
JJ?
Ed, this is a public discussion. We are not going to answer that question.
Can someone give no, the microphone is coming. We have a live stream, so it needs to be on microphone.
Thank you. This is another fascinating panel. The question I want to ask, I'm going to direct it to you, Secretary Wilkie. Robert, if you'll permit me. You have worked for President Trump. You've worked for other presidents in other capacities. And you have a very, very profound understanding of, I think, what's happening here, just based on what I see and hear from you in the U.S. But I'm wondering if you can tell us here today why you think the president is making the decisions that he's making, and what's the end game for all of this?
And we're taking 2 more, this gentleman, and then our Latvian colleague.
Yes. Hi, Matt Braže from the Atlantic Council. As you all prepare to head to Ankara and struggle with ramping up defense production, how much does and how much should Turkey's burgeoning defense industry figure into your planning?
Okay, and...
Absolutely.
Minister Braže.
They both they both criticize me, so they are fine.
I was on Mar Sanjan Center for Geopolitical Studies, Riga. My question goes to General Gerhartz about drone warfare. How ready NATO is for drone warfare, as the moderator brilliantly brought up the issue with the Ukraine and Russian drones crashing in Latvia. Latvia's society is really rattled. So far, the interception rate in Latvia is 0%. So we had the case with Rezekne. 2 Ukrainian drones, well, obviously they were, it was not Ukraine's fault.
No.
Russians diverted them. They crashed in oil storage facilities, and they were not noticed. And it was the bystanders who, noticed the occasion and called the police. So, how ready are NATO member states and NATO at all? Because I was glad to hear how many troops you have, but what if Russia diverts, say, 1,500 drones that they diverted towards Ukraine on May 13th and 14th? What then?
Thank you.
Yes, 50.
So, General Gerhardt.
So I take this one now first, but I want to say as well something to the deep position strike, and at the end how we can increase the process of getting military capabilities. So if we talk joint warfare, we should not confuse it with single incursions. So first of all, that's what I mentioned already before. Yes, we have to deal with that. in order not that the societies lose the trust in military and as well NATO. And that comes to low-cost sensors, acoustic sensors, that's low-cost effectors. And I see that now all over the eastern flank, that all the countries are going for it. Important in NATO is that should be not only a task to the forward nations or the frontline nations, that's a task for everybody in NATO. So even if you are in the European depths, you should be caring about how the eastern flank is deterred in Estonia and Latvia. So something they have to discuss on a political level, because at the end, if you need capabilities, there are some financial resources behind. But we shouldn't confuse that with joint warfare. Joint warfare is completely something different. And I think in terms of joint warfare, I give you one example. If you see the presence, and that was the Estonian Prime mentioned yesterday here, if you see the presence of NATO forces in the Baltic Sea region, which increased over the last years, and it's not only the naval assets you see, obviously. It is cyber, space, it's the air domain, it's land forces, which can attribute, and we exercise that all the time. And now especially with having Sweden and Finland on board. If we do joint warfare in the way it has to be done, and we are capable of, we have sea control, that's how we call it, of the Baltic Sea region. So do not confuse single incursions of drones with joint warfare. Deep position strike, good question, because that at the end touches the topic Carlo mentioned, and the minister talked about the distance we have to run, and we are all sure on that one, but what is the speed we have to do it? And I would say we started the one, but it could and should be faster. And that goes to innovative companies. We have a lot of innovations which come as some low-cost deep position strike assets, but we have more, I would say, high-tech companies as well, which can come in soon time with those deep position strike capabilities. But there's more to it, there's targeting and so on. And only one more important topic when we talk about increase in speed of capabilities, and that's something I reach out to myself, to my military colleagues. In the past, we always had the tendency to go for the most picture perfect, for the golden solution. That's something we can learn from Ukraine. Sometimes it's good to go for the just good enough solution, because that saves you time and money. And that's what we have to do.
Let me comment very briefly the drone. First, when Russia will launch a drone attack against NATO, then this is Article 5. Secondly, when we talk about like one-time incursion, we are living in a peacetime. So we have to understand that we are not keeping the full readiness as Ukrainians are keeping. And even having full readiness with 50,000 people every single day countering the drones, they cannot catch 15 to 20% of the drones. So, we cannot compare the peacetime with the wartime. So, just to understand what we are talking about. Secondly, very briefly, what Major Braže said regarding the Turkey's capabilities, industrial capabilities. Why did it happen? Why Turkey started to increase the capabilities? Because they lost the supply lines after the coup. And now we see that Turkey's industry's capabilities and capacities are very, very high, and which is great to see. They are still our allies in NATO, and this is great to see that Turkey is doing a lot. We are buying from Turkey many things. Turkey is one of the Turkish companies is investing 300 millions to Estonia to establish a munition factory. So, but just to understand that this is going up. The same, by the way, in Ukraine. And this is when we don't understand that protectionism is not our friend, then it happens. When US is not allowing to buy directly from Lockheed or Northrop or many others, then Europe will establish its own industry. But also inside of Europe, we need to cooperate. And last but not least, the DPS were so regarding the DPS, so definitely we will have our own capabilities. But as Baiba also mentioned, we cannot talk about loudly. So many things are in process. and it's good to know that they are in process.
But of course,
can I just say something about the deep precision strike? Because the debate is focused very much on the Tomahawk and the Dark Eagle. And what is less known that this is something which is part of the multi-domain task force. It's part of an American way of warfighting to keep all domains open once you have to act. So the bigger question is, because this is what puzzles me, that everyone is now thinking that if you have some deep precision strike capabilities, everything will be fine. The bigger question is, are we ready to duplicate this way of warfighting, or what does it mean from an American perspective that they took the decision not to send the DPS capabilities to Europe?
Yeah.
And this is the bigger question than the question, where do we get now a couple of hundreds cruise missiles, rather from the US or from Turkey or from this Dutch company and so on and so forth?
Yeah,
it's a
that
bigger question.
capability was supposed to be bridging the gap until Europe built its own capability. Minister Braže,
just a quick answer to Maris, also from my side, that we are deeply grateful to the allies doing Baltic air policing, because they did lift it up immediately and basically were there to make sure that nothing more serious happened. Just as Hanno says, yes, the various drones have been over Poland. At that time, it was the Dutch F-35 taking it down with a million worth missile, one of them, and few other things happened. It will be very difficult to take down all the drones. It will be very difficult. It will be very difficult, and there will be these accidents that will happen. But as just President Stubb yesterday said about their nightly incident, was that it was not a military threat.
Well, I get to answer the elephant in the room question, but yes, but it's one of the most well-read and capable reporters in the United States, Mr. Green. Let me give you an example of what he's asking. I just had dinner with the papal nuncio to Washington. By the way, the back of my head is flat because of the Jesuits, which I pointed out to him. I will not name the official he was mentioning, but one senior official in the administration, he said, tried to argue the meaning of the City of God by St. Augustine with the former prior general of the Augustine Order, the Holy Father. That answers part of your question, JJ. The processes are not there. He mentioned I worked for Dr. Rice during the Bush administration before I went to work for Rumsfeld. Dr. Rice was the referee between two titanic personalities, General Powell at the State Department, Donald Rumsfeld at the Department of Defense. There's no process that gives the president a condensed or a fair view, analysis of what is coming out of the two most important elements of America's national security process. And I can throw the CIA. Yeah, currently. And I can throw the CIA in there. I also think, when I was in the cabinet, I was the youngest one there. And you already know how old I am because I mentioned I was born at the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis. We had a great deal of experience. Large people, Bill Barr, Mnuchin, Ross, Gina Haspel, and I'm leaving out a few, several governors. I don't think they have that now. And I will also say, and I will be cast in the outer darkness for this, we have people making decisions, particularly on Europe, who have an understanding of Europe that just strains credulity, and I'll give you an example. We already know about Denmark and Greenland. Nobody in the administration seemed to know that Danes died fighting with Americans in the Middle East. A larger number than, in terms of per capita, than even France and Britain. That infamous signal discussion where they were trashing the capabilities and the courage of European soldiery. They didn't know enough to know that the refueling planes for the American strikes on Iran, the people piloting those flying gas cans were Dutch, Belgian, and British. And so by doing that, and they already knew the Russians were reading, they'd already cracked signal. If the Russians had been listening at that one moment, they would have put Europeans as well as Americans in danger. So I think it's a combination of many things. And I'm a William Faulkner devotee. I'm into stream of consciousness. But process is important. And that process that has been in place since the Truman administration is not there. So you've removed a level of expertise, as well as the experience of people who've been in this business for a long time.
On that sobering note, I want to thank everyone for their candor and experience and what they've shared this morning, and invite everyone out to have some coffee.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Minister.
How's your life been going on? I got a